Memory, the story we tell ourselves. Deeply philosophical back and forth between a human and an artificial intelligence. It's to completely dismantle the idea that your memory is a reliable archive of your life.
We're going to explore how your brain actively curates your reality, the actual neuroscience behind why the story you tell yourself is, frankly, heavily fictionalized.
Heavily fictionalized, and why that built-in deception might actually be your brain's most vital survival mechanism.
It's an unsettling transcript, honestly, because we are so conditioned to think of human memory as, like a filing cabinet.
Or a DVR.
Exactly. A digital video recorder where you just hit retrieve, play it back, and see exactly what happened. But the psychological and neurological reality presented in the source material proves that memory functions entirely differently. It is an active, ongoing process of reconstruction.
And the scale of that reconstruction is just, it becomes obvious when you look at the raw math laid out in the source. Let's just unpack this for a second. Think about your own childhood. You lived roughly 8,000 days before you reached adulthood. 8,000 days. If you sit down right now with a pen and paper and try to document every single full day, you can actually remember from start to finish.
Most people can recall maybe a few dozen?
A few dozen. A highly reflective person might hit 40 days.
40 days retained out of an original 8,000.
That is less than 1%.
Less than 1%. And to understand the mechanics of that, we really have to look at how the brain actually processes experience. Because we have this overabundance of sensory input hitting us at any given second.
Right. And the brain is an incredibly energy-expensive organ. It consumes about 20% of the body's energy, despite being only 2% of its weight.
Wow. That's a huge metabolic cost.
It is. It simply cannot afford the energy to store a high-definition recording of every single day. So synaptic pruning is constantly happening, clearing out neural pathways that aren't being actively used to make room for new information.
I get the need for efficiency, sure, but what completely defies logic to me is the criteria the brain uses for what survives that purge.
It feels completely random.
Yes, you might lose the entirety of a major graduation ceremony or, a pivotal family vacation, but your brain somehow dedicates permanent high-definition storage space to a completely unremarkable Tuesday in 1994.
Right, where you perfectly recall the exact shade of yellow on a specific classroom wall.
Or the smell of rain on the asphalt outside a house you moved away from 20 years ago. There is no objective rubric for importance here. And the mechanism driving that weird selection process involves the interplay between the amygdala, which processes emotion, and the hippocampus.
The hippocampus is the memory consolidation part, right?
Exactly. The brain does not archive your life based on a logical assessment of what will matter to your adult self. It archives based on spikes in emotion and novelty.
So it's not looking for plot points in your life story.
Not at all. That random Tuesday in 1994 just happened to register a subtle emotional shift or a novel sensory experience. The amygdala essentially handed the hippocampus a chemical highlighter pen and flagged that specific sensory data for long-term storage.
And this biological process happens entirely in the background. Think about that for a second. The foundational archive you use to build your identity, to understand who you are,
was curated by an unconscious biological sorting algorithm.
Yes, without ever asking for your input. 99% of your childhood that actually occurred is gone, and you are building your entire self-concept on the surviving 1%.
Which brings us to a much more unsettling realization. Because it's tempting to assume that, okay, fine, we only retain 1%, but that 1% is at least an accurate, objective record.
And here's where it gets really interesting. It is not accurate. There's this landmark study out of UC Irvine that perfectly illustrates the danger of certainty.
The video footage study.
Yeah. Researchers showed participants video footage of events, things they actually just watched happen. Later, when they asked them to describe the footage, a significant portion of the subjects confidently detailed elements and actions that were absolutely not present in the video.
And when the researchers challenged them, pointing out the discrepancies,
they doubled down. They fought back. Their subjective feeling of remembering was so strong, it completely overrode the objective evidence right in front of them.
And the mechanics of memory retrieval explain why they felt so confident. In neuroscience, there's a concept called reconsolidation.
Reconsolidation, break that down for us.
Every time you recall a memory, you are not opening a read-only file on a hard drive. You are pulling the memory out of storage, putting it into a pliable, editable state, interacting with it, and then writing it back into storage.
So you are essentially remembering the last time you remembered the event, not the original event itself.
Precisely. Each retrieval is an opportunity for the memory to be altered by your current mood, new information, or even leading questions.
Which brings us to Elizabeth Loftus.
Her car crash experiment is legendary.
It really is. It highlights how easily memories are manipulated. She showed people videos of traffic accidents. Afterward, she asked one group, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other?
Right, using the word hit.
But she asked another group, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? And the group that heard the word smash not only estimated higher speeds, but weeks later, they falsely remembered seeing broken glass at the scene.
And there was no broken glass.
None. The mere introduction of a slightly more aggressive verb fundamentally altered their visual memory of the event.
And she took that mechanism even further with the Lost in the Mall technique. Loftus and her team demonstrated that it is entirely possible to implant a completely fabricated memory of a highly stressful childhood event into an adult's mind.
Just entirely made up out of thin air.
Yes. They presented participants with 4 stories from their childhood, supplied by their own relatives. 3 were true, and 1 was a complete fiction about being lost in a shopping mall, crying, and eventually being rescued by an elderly woman.
And what happened?
Within a few weeks of simply being asked to try and remember this fake event, roughly 25% of the participants not only accepted it as truth, but began generating their own sensory details.
They added their own details to a lie.
They described the old woman's clothes, the specific stores in the mall. They felt genuine emotional distress over a complete fiction.
The implications of that are profound, especially when we look at that sibling paradox mentioned in the human-AI debate.
Oh, the sibling paradox is a perfect example.
Right. Ask any 2 siblings to describe their childhood, and you will get 2 mutually exclusive documentaries. They grew up in the exact same house, under the same rules, living out the same daily routines.
Yet they will fiercely dispute who the difficult parent was.
Or whether a family vacation was a total disaster or a massive triumph, or the exact sequence of events in some legendary family argument.
And this perfectly illustrates the concept of the brain as a biased editor rather than a passive camera. Once an individual develops a core narrative about themselves, their memory editor goes to work preserving that specific narrative.
So if one sibling adopts the narrative that they were, say, the overlooked peacekeeper of the family,
their brain will actively seek out and consolidate memories of being ignored or having to mediate disputes.
and simultaneously, the brain performs a selective deletion process. If that same sibling had moments where they were the center of attention or where they instigated a conflict, the editor just quietly discards those memories.
Not because they didn't happen, but because they introduce continuity errors into the established psychological storyline.
Your personality, your deeply held belief about who you are, is heavily reliant on this massive selection bias.
Exactly. And the human-AI debate in the transcript leans into this to argue that the feeling of absolute certainty is actually a giant red flag.
A red flag.
Yes. The more rigidly certain you feel about a memory, the higher the probability that it has been heavily reconstructed and polished by your internal editor over years of storytelling. The raw, objective data has long been replaced by a version of the event optimized to protect your current ego.
This naturally leads to questions about core memories. Because popular psychology loves the concept of the core memory, right? Those monumental, foundational moments that define our worldview.
We tend to view those as structurally sound.
Right. We assume they're fundamentally different from the mundane, everyday memories that get distorted. The assumption is that moments of immense significance just imprint perfectly onto our neurocircuitry.
And that assumption is precisely what the transcript targets next, because the reality of how state-dependent memory functions completely shatters the myth of the pristine core memory.
Shatters it.
Core memories are very rarely formed during moments of objective clarity or calm reflection. They are almost exclusively encoded during states of extreme emotional arousal. Intense fear, profound grief, trauma, or sudden euphoria.
And the mechanics of survival dictate that process. When you are in a state of high threat or heightened arousal, your amygdala takes over, and it narrows your focus strictly to the perceived threat or the most intense stimuli.
The brain sacrifices broad contextual accuracy for the sake of survival data.
So you might remember the exact look on someone's face during a severe argument.
But your brain completely fails to encode the sequence of events leading up to it or the nuances of the environment.
When we look at flashbulb memories, like people's recollections of where they were during major global tragedies, studies consistently show that individuals remain highly confident in their memories year after year.
Even as the factual details of their accounts drift significantly. They remember the intensity of the emotion perfectly, but the objective facts become corrupted over time.
And the impact of that biological mechanism on someone who survived a difficult or unstable childhood is just incredibly heavy.
It's devastating.
Because for those individuals, their foundational structural memories, the pillars supporting their entire understanding of trust, safety, and self-worth, those were laid down when their nervous systems were in a perpetual state of crisis.
And those structural memories were encoded before the individual had the cognitive development or the vocabulary or the broader perspective to interpret the events accurately.
Right? They captured a child's panicked, survival-driven interpretation of a crisis.
And the brain locked it in as an immutable fact about how the world operates. This helps explain why people with complex trauma histories can find it incredibly difficult to integrate positive experiences later in life.
Their fundamental operating system was programmed under the worst possible conditions, using a highly biased, threat-focused lens.
And we see this play out even outside of trauma.
Yeah, think about relationships. You can have a relationship that features 3 years of peaceful, contented companionship. And those 3 years will often blur together into a vague, low-resolution sense of warmth.
But one massive relationship-ending betrayal.
The brain will record every agonizing second of it in devastating high definition. Normal human memory seems inherently flawed, heavily biased toward preserving pain and conflict, while letting peace simply fade away.
Which naturally invites the big question posed in the transcript.
Right. So what does this all mean? If our standard memory system is so fallible and biased, wouldn't a perfect, uneditable memory be the ultimate cognitive advantage?
You'd think so. But the debate introduces the phenomenon of hyperthymesia.
Also known clinically as highly superior autobiographical memory.
Right, to explore what happens when the editing process fails completely.
And the documented cases we have on hyperthymesia are astonishing. Individuals like Marilu Henner or Jill Price, they possess an involuntary ability to recall almost every single day of their lives.
And they don't use mnemonic devices or actively try to memorize their schedules. Their brains simply do not discard episodic memories.
They can tell you what the weather was on a random Thursday in 1987, what they wore, and the exact content of a mundane conversation they had at lunch.
From a neurological perspective, hyperthymesia appears to involve an anomaly in how the brain handles that synaptic pruning we discussed earlier. The sorting algorithm that usually clears out the trivial data is basically inactive.
And society often romanticizes this condition as a superpower, right? Like the ultimate defense against being gaslit or forgetting important facts. But the individuals living with it frequently describe an entirely different reality.
Jill Price actually described her condition as a running movie that never stops, one she has no ability to pause or turn off.
And the most striking detail from her case study is her description of emotional recall. She stated that she often cannot distinguish the sensation of remembering an event from the sensation of actively reliving it in the present moment.
That phenomenon forces a complete paradigm shift regarding how we view the utility of memory. The inability to abstract information is a severe cognitive burden.
Normal memory processes allow us to extract the general lesson from a painful experience while letting the sharp, agonizing details fade.
We remember not to touch the hot stove, but we don't have to re-experience the excruciating pain of the burn every time we look at a kitchen.
But for someone with hyperthymesia, that protective fading process does not occur. The emotional footprint of every event remains at 100% capacity.
Every humiliation,
Every harsh rejection.
every period of profound grief is preserved in its original raw state. Time does not heal all wounds for these individuals because time does not have the mechanism to dilute the emotional intensity.
They are carrying the unedited, accumulating weight of every difficult moment they have ever survived.
And the philosophical conclusion drawn from studying this is profound. Perfect memory isn't a superpower, it's a burden. Forgetting is not a glitch or a failure of human cognition.
It is an evolutionary imperative.
Exactly. The past must be allowed to degrade so that the present remains livable. The psychological weight of perfect retention would paralyze us, preventing us from adapting to new circumstances or forgiving ourselves for past mistakes.
Which brings us to the climax of the transcript. It takes this concept of perfect memory and pushes it into an intense debate about morality. This is where the AI and the human in the text really clash.
It's a fascinating standoff.
The human argues that memory is the foundational engine of moral accountability. Concepts like guilt, empathy, consequence, and justice. They simply cannot exist without a reliable memory.
You can only take responsibility for an action if you remember performing it.
And you can only empathize with suffering if you can recall the sensation of pain. Therefore, the human argues, memory dictates morality.
But the AI pushes back and raises an important question by exploring the behavioral consequences of flawless retention. Do people with better memories actually make for more ethical humans?
And observations suggest the opposite.
Right. Individuals who keep forensic, impenetrable logs of every slight, insult, and wrong done to them are rarely the most forgiving or empathetic people in a society.
The perfect memory becomes a weapon. If you have a flawless archive of exactly how someone wronged you, you are provided with an overwhelming mountain of evidence validating your own grievance.
At the same time, your memory is inherently restricted to your own perspective. It cannot record the internal motivations or the contextual struggles of the other person.
So the weight of that one-sided, perfectly preserved evidence creates a rigid self-righteousness. Certainty and morality are entirely different things.
They are often at odds. A perfect memory provides absolute certainty, leaving zero room for the grace of misunderstanding.
It completely eliminates the possibility of saying, hey, perhaps I misheard you. Or maybe the situation was more complex than I remember.
Knowing that neither party in a conflict possesses a perfect recording of the event should radically alter how we approach disagreements.
Acknowledging the flaws in our own neurobiology creates space for empathy. The forensic memory leads to the death of forgiveness, because forgiveness often requires letting go of the exact details of the offense.
The ultimate synthesis of the AI's argument is that recognizing the fallibility of your own mind is a moral imperative. If you understand that your memory is an active, biased editor designed to protect your ego, rather than a passive archive designed to record objective truth.
It forces a necessary humility.
Yes.
You really have to stop treating your internal monologue as unquestionable testimony under oath, because you are not a reliable witness to your own life, and the people around you are not reliable witnesses to theirs.
Embracing that unreliability should make you significantly less dogmatic in your arguments. It invites curiosity about how other people experience the exact same event.
And more importantly, it demands a higher level of honesty with yourself about the specific narratives your internal editor has chosen to prioritize.
You do not possess an archive of memories. You possess the current draft of a story.
The current draft of a story. That conceptual shift from archivist to storyteller, it's empowering, but it carries a heavy responsibility. because the debate transcript concludes by pointing out the continuous nature of this process.
The editorial decisions aren't just happening in retrospect, they're happening dynamically, second by second.
The mechanism of memory consolidation never stops.
Your brain is continuously taking the present moment, filtering it through your biases, and deciding its future relevance.
Which leaves us with a deeply unsettling reality to consider as we wrap up. Right now, in this exact moment, as you are listening to this deep dive, your brain is actively deciding what today will mean in 10 years.
It is currently choosing which specific concepts from this conversation you will carry forward into your worldview, and which parts it will quietly delete to protect your existing beliefs.
The editor is working without your explicit permission. So the question you really have to ask yourself today is this: if your brain is actively editing your life story in real time, without your permission, what subtle edits is it making to your reality right this very second? And are you self-aware enough to notice those edits before they harden into your permanent truth?